Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 11th Global Energy Parliament. Now, the session of the Parliament begins. Honorable Speaker, please.
The 11th session of the Global Energy Parliament is called to order. Most hearty congratulations, honorable members. Now you have taken the oath of office, which enjoins upon you a great responsibility of fostering in the world peace and harmony, as our patron, His Holiness Jagat Guru, always exhorts us. The proceedings of the Parliament begins.
Hello everyone. So thank you very much for your kind invitation. So my name is Florent Pasquier. I'm assistant professor in Sorbonne University in France, and I'm devoted to the formation of the future teachers. In that way, a global approach, also an energetical approach, is something very important, but we have to realize that some of the students won't accept this dimension in the practice as teachers. So I have to find ways to include such approaches in my teachings. I'm trying to share some slides, but I don't find the button in order to do this. Okay, so anyway, I will continue without the slides. And for this, I use two semantics approaches, which are the transpersonal psychology from one part, and the transdisciplinarity methodology on the second one. Transpersonal psychology is devoted to the aspects of the mind and the consciousness, and transdisciplinarity deals with what is between, behind, and further disciplines. So it's totally different than interdisciplinarity. Transdisciplinarity really deals with the mind, the consciousness, and even so the spirit, so the spiritual aspects, and we can mobilize them in general, or of course in education too. So there is a link, of course, between transpersonal psychology and transdisciplinarity, and the goal is to produce conditions of teachings and learnings in order to integrate those aspects and be able to accompany the students, the pupils, and sometimes the teachers in a deep reflection. We could call it meta-reflection about the different aspects of their professional activities. But of course, personal activities like self-development or community development are totally engaged also in the professional aspects of the realization of teachings. So my proposition, I will finish soon, is to unify the entire self, which is body, emotions, mental, and spiritual, unify the entire man, woman, between him, the others, and the nature, and combine this with its personal development, professional development, and community development. What's the goal and the conclusion of all these semantics aspects is that I created a special kind of pedagogy. I called it implicative, integrative, and intentional pedagogy. Implicative because you engage the pupils, the students, in the way of their teachings, and you ask them to think about the way they are conducting their apprenticeship. This is implicative. Integrative means, as a teacher, you engage all kinds of pedagogies from the frontal one until the more creative ones during the formation process. And intentional means you never forget what goals you are pursuing when you are acting as a professional and also as a pupils. And I got most of the time good results. And I have to say that if, as I said just before, some students refuse to engage in such way, the huge majority of them are so happy to listen such a different discourse on what is education. And they fully appreciate a deep thought about the educational process, which engage consciousness and spirituality and the whole person as a total self. That's it. Thank you very much.
The next Parliament going to present is Dr. Bindu RL. She's the former professor and HOD of Department of Education, University of Kerala.
Let me make a submission on the topic, education for total consciousness. As Swami Isha has already explained, what is the philosophy behind this concept, that is education for total consciousness. And we know India has a great tradition in developing a system of education for the whole world. That is, the global perspective has been already evolved even centuries back, and that still remains as a model for the whole world. That is just not transforming knowledge or transferring knowledge to the people who are needy, but developing the higher levels of qualities and consciousness. That is, starting from sensation to transcendental meditation, the emancipation of the mind, body, and intellect. Actually, these theories or these concepts have been integrated in the concept of education for total consciousness. And let me share some slides depicting the main concepts or the main ideas related to this theme, that is education for total consciousness. So it is education for total consciousness, integration of subjective and objective knowledge. As we see, we have a system, or all parts of the world is aspiring for a global system of education in which teaching and learning with a global perspective. That is recognizing the interdependencies and interconnections, issues, regions, peoples, places, systems, and times. It is common for all parts of the world. And this global perspective is connected to international dimensions, world studies, global studies, and ultimately education for sustainable development. And this education for a global perspective was created as an approach to education that would incorporate within existing curriculum a global consciousness. That is all we deal now. And the knowledge, attitudes, values, and skills necessary to help educators prepare our young people for effective participation in a world rapidly becoming interactive and interdependent. And as we know, in this COVID situation, it is emerging as a challenging and very a crucial scenario for each and every people. So what kind of education we need for all, or which system of education is the best? And our father of the nation, Gandhiji, has given not simply a definition for education, but it's a basic tool for the development of consciousness and reconstitution of society. And this concept has been evolved by or emancipated by Swami Isha, that is education for total consciousness. So what is this consciousness? You see, everything that constitutes the life of a human being from birth to death, that is comprising of consciousness or developing this consciousness. And it is the light that enables the individual to realize ignorance, ego, intelligence, and the mind when receives knowledge. The language that helps him to reach this stage is Bodha Bhasha, the language of consciousness, Swami Isha says. So he says everything present in the world outside is present within us, and the state of keeping them in harmony is the outcome of real education. This is the aim of education for total consciousness. So remember the word real education. We are coming to that point. So this education for total consciousness, that is, it's an attempt to regenerate education, integrating the external and internal knowledge. External knowledge is objective knowledge and internal knowledge is a subjective knowledge. The universe is the expression of both internal and external realities. So this is an enlightened state of education. He has already explained it, and we are coming to this real education. So right action, love, peace, non-violence, a mixture of all this is inevitable for real education to be practical or to be materialized. That is a balance between the external knowledge and the internal knowledge. So how this knowledge is gained? These are the essential elements of integral group, that is integration in holistic education. And this philosophy of education is talking about total education in the global scenario, national education policy for holistic development, integration of subjective and objective knowledge, philosophy of the mind, and cognitive concept of consciousness. So this is an educational approach that adds systematic development of higher states of consciousness to the school and the university curriculum. So knowledge is structured with consciousness, and students can discover the field of pure consciousness within themselves as the source of all knowledge. So this is comprised of all fields of life, or all fields of education, or all branches of knowledge. That's philosophy, linguistics, anthropology, neuroscience, even artificial intelligence. And it is visible, and the individual is not able to realize the imperfection created within the walls. That is when we say philosophically. So he has explained what is the science of I theory. That is, everything is created by the I particle, the basic unit of energy vibration. How this energy and vibration is balancing, or it is being mixed up, is everything explained well. And this is the I theory. And we have to realize that the individual is formed by the energy flow at varied levels. Science has already explained it, and philosophy has given all its support for materializing the concepts in science. And the white matter, red matter, and black matter. This is the components of I particle, and this white matter, and this is the area through which and as you see, white matter has the lowest frequency and longest wavelength, and therefore its transparency is highest, allowing consciousness to shine through more. So the shining of consciousness through these three stages, or three states of matter, has been explained by this picture, or this concept, that is red matter, black matter, and white matter. And behavioral patterns, then qualities that is to be developed, or that is to be exhibited by persons, also are connected with these details, that is this red matter, black matter, and white matter. So all this constitute the development of consciousness, from starting a vibration to the total consciousness. And we have this concept of consciousness-based education in India, that is just plugging us all into the beautiful eternal world within, and then watching things get better, which is what happens. It's a field of infinite, unbounded peace within every human being. And when you experience, if you live in that peace. So education must be for happiness and peace. Many times we forget that, even though we are teachers. So this consciousness-based education should be leading to education for total knowledge, or total consciousness. And by closely studying the I particle and I theory, we are led to definite knowledge that the internal and the external worlds do have a separate existence, and I and the universe are ultimately the same. We are merely vibrating energy, vibrating consciousness. When that vibration ceases, when there is no I particle, there is no universe, and there is only total consciousness. This is the highest level of philosophical meaning that we attribute to this concept. So the bliss that we are all after, whether we know it or not, unlimited, all-pervading happiness and awareness. So what is the social change that is needed? A balance between the group values, individual values, and the social values, where the consciousness play a great role. And this is possible through blending science and spirituality, because we are living in a world where the science predominates or science rules everything, but spirituality has its own role, or it should decide how a science should be materialized or how a science should work. So the more you meditate, spend time in nature, raise your consciousness, and get in touch with the more spiritual side of life, the more highly refined and sensitive you will become to subtle energy. And this is possible through this concept of education for total consciousness. As teachers, social workers, parents, family members, or members of the community, all people in the universe, because it's a global energy parliament and everybody is listening from all over the world or different parts of the world, we can think aloud, we can think in unity, so that we can materialize this concept for the betterment of the coming generation. And that was the concept of India, that is Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam. Thank you.
I'm very honored to be among the speakers who are so knowledgeable and so energetic. I'm Jing Lin from University of Maryland, College Park. I'm a professor in international education policy. We are facing huge crisis in our world today. We face climate change, which could lead humanity to extinction. Already we are seeing signs of great species extinction. We also have built up massive weapons of destruction that could eliminate all the species on Earth. So what kind of consciousness has led us into such kind of existential dilemma or crisis? I think it's because that we have a consciousness of separation, a consciousness that's in low vibration. It is based on greed. It's based on self versus others. It's based on anthropocentrism, that we as humans are above other species. So how do we rebuild our consciousness? How do we build this new connection to each other as beloved family members? And how do we build our connections with nature? That is, that we are part of this living system, the ecological system that give us life, that is playing an inherent and sacred part in the whole cosmic system and structure. I think we need to have an education for the sages who have wisdom and vision and energy to change the world. I'm thinking of 2,500 years ago, when we live in the so-called axial age, that we see a lot of spiritual teachers, gurus, and sages that come to the world. And they left us with wisdom teaching that now we have largely forgotten. At least they are not built into the structure of our society. So we had Lao Tzu, Confucius, and Buddha, and many other spiritual teachers, right? I believe these wisdom teachers are people who harbor this sacred energy, the energy of creation. Therefore, they are connected to the stars, to the cosmic forces, to human society, and to all species. So we need to revive that kind of wisdom. We need to have a new consciousness, right? Through this, like I would call education for the sages. So what is education for the sages? I think we need to build a new value system in education and in society. That is, we see the teaching of love. We see love, cooperation, interconnection, forgiveness, care, and so on, as the fundamental structures and principles of the whole universe. We see that the solar star, the solar system, works harmoniously because there are these internal mechanisms that regulates the working of the system. In our human society, everything will collapse if we don't have the cosmic structures of cooperation, love, and forgiveness and reconciliation to sustain it. So how do we recognize that these values are the structures of the universe and structure of our society. I think we can start from very basic practices. First, in education, we should center the teaching and learning of humility. We are a species that's very, very arrogant. We have seen ourselves to be above of other species, and some people above others, right? So learning humility is like to learn to, like what Gandhi says, to reduce myself to zero. So humble that we see all lives, all others as our teachers. The second is that we learn to be grateful. To be grateful for all the food we receive, for all the teachings we receive from teachers. So these are some principles that we can build into education in the daily basis. I want to end by saying that, what Zhuangzi said, when I learn, when I know, it's not enough to know by listening. It's not enough to know by thinking. It's not enough to know by heart. I know by qi. Qi means the energy. That's the energy that vibrates in the whole universe, that makes all the life sacred and meaningful, right? So our education for the sages, it's really to learn to harbor the energy that create the universe, to harbor the energy that give us love and vibrate in the whole universe. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jing Lin. That's an excellent concept, education for the sages. We are all the while thinking of education by the sages. Yes, there is a need for that. Thank you very much for the original ideas which are presented here, which will certainly go a long way in broadening our perception of the concept of education for total consciousness. Thank you so much.
The person is Dr. K. Unnikrishnan. He is the former principal, NSS College, Pandalam, Pathanamthitta district, Kerala.
Namaste. My presentation is about the interconnectedness between the idea of a global education policy and Indian knowledge systems. How we can draw sustenance from the Indian knowledge systems to elicit excellence from the contemporary educational scenario. So that is my proposition. See, UNESCO announced a fourfold aim for education. Learning, the first one is learning to know, the second one is learning to do, the third one is learning to live together, and the fourth one is learning to be. So this seminar, fortunately, is about the last pillar, the most important pillar of education, that is learning to be. And this proposition is possible by looking at the patterns and the archetypes which are prevalent in Indian intellectual discourse. The intellectual discourse generated through the Indian knowledge system is fundamentally the outcome of an incessant search for the real nature of consciousness. The Bhagavad Gita, in one example, it dwells at length on Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman, the manifested consciousness and the pure indeterminate consciousness. So this pure consciousness is unmanifest, and therefore no senses can have access to it. So this is the difficulty. The difficulty in achieving a global education policy lies here. The difficulty of philosophy in its deepest sense to reach out to the world at large, to make people convinced what exactly is the nature of pure consciousness. So in this regard, what can India offer to the world in achieving a global education policy? This is the question. So I have 4 propositions before this parliament. The first one is to reclaim and reinvent the archetype of the guru, the living gurus who are in plenty living in India. So a big effort, an all-round effort is needed to create platforms where you can listen to the great gurus of today. So the guru archetype, it represents the nature of consciousness. In fact, the guru is a symbol that takes one beyond the binaries. The guru archetype is unconditional love, excellence, and pure consciousness in an impersonal reality. So besides this aspect, the Gurukula system has an underlying pattern. And if you want to adopt the pattern, the first one I would say is the transdisciplinarity, which is implied there in the Indian Gurukula system. See, the Indian knowledge system, it is basically an epistemological process behind every tangible and intangible achievements in India. So you have it's in there in arts, crafts, architecture, astronomy, mathematics, Ayurveda, linguistics, Dhanurveda, etc. It is a system that produced a lineage of excellence. Kanada, Sushruta, Bharadwaja, Kaudilya, Patanjali, it goes on like that. So, but where is the delinking? What process happened? We have to reinvent this excellence, and we have to attempt to those patterns which will come to some positive results. So the reinventing this pattern, this transdisciplinarity in the learning process is very important when we are evolving a global education policy. And transdisciplinarity is a significant aspect of Indian knowledge system, which will contribute to a global education policy. The term transdisciplinarity, as applicable to ancient Indian pedagogy, implies the unified integral perspective that transcends both the disciplines under consideration. It's something new. It's so removal of the existing compartmentalization of studies is very important when we are thinking about the global policy on education. So this is a new policy which is evolving humanity towards total consciousness, which is going to be a very revolutionary step in the field of education. And for achieving this, we need two things: tremendous changes in the evaluation system. And the first thing is to evolve an innovative new evaluation system, which will standardized evaluation system, which will correctly gauge the holistic development of the child. It's not there so far. So that is one thing. The second thing is there is also a need for a tool for measuring cultural literacy. Again, a standardized test for measuring cultural literacy. See, you belong to a culture and you need to know what you are by understanding your culture, your background, and your own personal identity. So this is possible by developing a standardized. So thank you for the opportunity for sharing my thoughts with all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you, respected speaker.
Thank you, Professor Unnikrishnan. You have really opened up some new vistas of thinking.
Dr. Guido-Henri de Couvreur, he is a philosopher and teacher, Vice President of Club of Rome EU, a member of Association of World Education Belgium.
Education and consciousness, we already have been listening to many of these things, so I will not repeat that. But philosophy is a battle against the bewitchment of our intelligence by means of language, from Ludwig Wittgenstein. And the limits of my language are the limits of my mind, as I know that the words have, and I cannot read it because other things are here on my screen. I don't know why. Anyway, therefore, we think, in my opinion, so far it was not mentioned explicitly, and therefore I think it would be a good idea. Teaching can be seen in three different words, because the words make the difference. There is the schooling, the training, and the education. And so far I can see that these things are merely mixed. And I think from methodological way, it is not good to do so, because there is a semantic problem. Schooling is the school, for instance, the Palo Alto School. Then there is another example, the school of, what is this? Scholarship. A school as a movement or a group of people with the same ideas, and often within art, science, or politics. And so far, there is no direct connection with education. But we have the expression going to school. And many people in the world go to school, and many are not going to school yet. The thing that is not so good in the today's schooling system, according to me, is it's full of dogmatism. For instance, there is preached a permanent economic growth, and that is, as the former speaker was talking about anthropocentrism, it is a terrible aggression to many things. There is a paradigm protection, there is a blind pragmatism. If it makes money, so let it be. There is a lack of philosophy of silence, the possibility of silence and the boundaries. And there is positivism, but as stated few times now, is that not all important things are covered by science. And then today's schooling system is, in my opinion, characterized by competition. And that is the opposite of solidarity. And that is the opposite of what former speakers were talking about. Then there is training. Training is to do with repeating, drilling to know things without thinking. And sometimes training is positive, like driving a bicycle. You have to train, learn to swim, and so on. But there is another thing, and that is education should be, in my opinion, and it is in the line of many of the speakers before, an enlightening experience. Understood as much as more to do with a lifestyle, a transfer of values. And there is the German word Bildung, as the knowledge and skills acquired in various fields, also as regarding social norms and humanistic values. This maturation is described as an harmonization of the individual's mind and heart, and achieved through personal transformation. It presents the challenge to the individual accesses and belief systems, wherein philosophy and formation are linked, manners that refers to a process of both personal and cultural maturation. So education as an enlightening experience, simply said, building is what is left when all what is learned in the school is forgotten. Without improved education, we will not reach anywhere. And education has to do, in my opinion, with respect, empathy, tolerance, gender equivalence, eradication of poverty, demographical overload, place in nature, biodiversity, and more consciousness about life, world, nature, degrowth, ex-narratives, sustainability, and all what is renewable. If that is not there, and that is most of the time not the case in schooling, then we will arrive nowhere. So this is, in my opinion, very important. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. In fact, your point, education should be an enlightening experience. Yes, that is a crux of what Swamiji has also been saying. Education is enrichment, education is empowerment, education is enlightenment, and education is emancipation. We do agree with you, and we are glad that many of these input will go into the final policy that is going to be made here.
Now I invite Dr. Lakshmi, Assistant Professor of NSS Training College, Pangalam, for the submission.
His Holiness Swami Isha, members of the Parliament, and Dr. Lakshmi, I am submitting some views on the topic, cognitive concept of consciousness. Cognitive concept of consciousness. Now, let us see what is consciousness. Consciousness is an inner, private, objective, qualitative phenomenon of awareness. Consciousness is the awareness of present state of mind. But consciousness is not only the awareness of present state of mind. It is the awareness of states that are yet to be recognized. An individual's awareness is subjective and unique to each individual because we are unique and we are different. So, if a person can describe something he is experiencing in words, then it is a part of his consciousness. In the words of His Holiness Swami Isha, the body-based consciousness, that is vibrating consciousness, needs for its existence and absolute consciousness, that is non-vibrating consciousness. That consciousness is called supreme consciousness. Coming to the plane of consciousness, consciousness is regarded as the light that makes thoughts real. The experience of consciousness in various levels enables a person to understand things clearly or not. The thought clouds hide consciousness, and without knowing about things around, one is led to darkness. So, the consciousness plays a powerful role in making a person aware of the world around him and removing the unnecessary thought clouds from his consciousness. Cognition is a knowledge processing mediated by cerebral nervous system. There is a strong connection between cognition and consciousness. Cognition and consciousness depend on the organization and complexity of the organism with that of central nervous system. Then consciousness is a driving force in the process of evolution, amplifying and improving adaptive and cognitive process in an organism. There is a strong connection or bond between cognition and consciousness. Now, there comes the importance of supreme consciousness. As Swami Isha envisages that supreme consciousness is non-vibrating. When the vibration starts, that is body-based consciousness, this vibration hides the supreme consciousness, that is the non-vibrating consciousness. So, a human being is able to perceive the supreme consciousness in between the thoughts. But there should be a sufficient gap between the two. Swami Isha writes that we need to increase the space between the two thoughts. The ability to know how to do this and why we need, that is where we need a teacher or guru, the one who brings the light. So, attainment of supreme consciousness is the ultimate aim of any educational process. In the thoughts of Swamiji, the body-based consciousness, that is vibrating consciousness, needs for its and absolute consciousness, that is non-vibrating consciousness. That consciousness is called supreme consciousness. It is also called by terms like Anandam, Sat, Atma, Purna, etc. That is the omnipresent light. So, to attain the omnipresent light, one becomes the student and the other guru. When the skill to reach this stage is attained, teacher-people relationship becomes meaningful. So, there should be a balance between cognitive process and consciousness. So, to conclude, all our actions, that means cognitive process, are focused on the attainment of consciousness. That is a form of synchronization between body and the external world. Bridging the cognition and consciousness will achieve reaching the supreme.
Thank you, Professor Lakshmi, for a nice presentation.
Next member the submission is Dr. Viswanathan Nampoothiri. He is a retired professor of Sanskrit, Basilius College, Kottayam. His submission is given in the form of a video presentation. I request the technical team to present the video.
Welcome, Professor Viswanathan Nampoothiri.
I believe Indian philosophical thoughts on the human mind can be an excellent tool to support the students across the world. It can help them to better equip themselves in their learning process through lessons for focusing and concentrating the mind on the subject. In the Indian philosophy, mind is considered as the instrument for learning, since the mind is having tremendous qualities of the thoughts and feelings at all points of time. It is very important to have a proper control over the minds. A big question now is how this can be achieved. The Indian philosophical thinking is very clear. Or this matter we need to have a continuous and ongoing practice for controlling and managing this huge inflow of thoughts and feelings. We have the power and capacity to control even the mind through a regular and continuing process of mental exercise. This exercise must be continued perpetually, and this practice is called tapas. Tapas is a much broader concept, and it may be the improper to call it just as meditation. The controlling process of tapas, as defined in Ashtanga Yoga, helps to cleanse all the impurities of the minds. While framing the global education policy, my suggestion is that suitable guidance about mind control practices that can be practiced by students all over the world may be included in the such policy. My prayer for students of students all over the world is the everyone of capable of achieving their desired goals through regular mind control practices.